my leave ended, I went back to base. It was like a light switch clicked in my brain, and I made a lot of really big changes in my personal life as well as my professional life. Real estate's tough, it's not the easiest business to be in. Preparing for it helps.
All right, guys, today on the podcast, we have Jeremy Bourgeois, who is a real estate wholesaler. Now, he owns Scout Peak Home Buyers, and he's doing some incredible things on the wholesaling end. So, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I've really been looking forward to this.
Yes, we are excited for this. So, first off, I want to say, it's funny. As far as the wholesaling end goes, you take a different approach to it, but the thing that I love is I see that you like it to be a win-win for everybody. I've come across some wholesalers that they're just trying to get the best price. I understand that, but you tend to take into consideration, the other person, where they're at, and try to make things a win-win. And I just absolutely love that about you, right? It's a difference. And that's one of the reasons why I've been partnered with you on properties, right? Just because when you come across somebody like that that's just really open and honest and wanting to make things a win-win, it's a rare thing in your business and really probably in any business to have that. Some people are just kind of in it for themselves and forget about the other person. And how do you feel that impacts your success that you've had in the business?
Well, I think it positively impacts it quite a bit because when I was first learning wholesaling in real estate in general, I was learning from some people who were on the opposite end of the spectrum, or one person in particular who was kind of in it for himself. It was mostly about just you'd go and skin someone alive just to get a deal closed. And I didn't really like that. It didn't sit right with me. And so it took me a while to realize that wasn't the only way to do things. And now I don't do things that way. I really do try to make it a win-win situation for everyone who's involved in the deal. And if it's not a win-win situation, I don't really want to do that deal because I want to be able to sleep at night. I want to go home and actually know that I'm helping people out in my job. Because at the end of the day, if you're in real estate, your goal should be somewhat, at least, to help someone out, especially in this kind of a business in wholesaling where you're dealing with people who are in situations that aren't so great sometimes. You don't want to be the person who's coming in and just taking advantage of that and really putting them into an even worse spot. So that's something that we really try to avoid is putting people into a worse spot than they already are.
I really appreciate that about you. Let's go back a little bit. Because you were a Marine.
Yes.
And you told me a little bit of a story before, and I'd like you to kind of get into that, of what took you from being in the Marines and then leading you down this path. So if you can start maybe from, you get out of the Marines, what's next?
Sure.
Right.
So,
how did you determine that? How did you determine what was next for you?
Yeah, so I'll back it up even a little bit more to about a year before I got out of the Marine Corps. At that point, I had decided that I did want to get out, and I had about a year left on my contract. Didn't really know what I was going to do next, but I went home on leave for a couple weeks, and I met with my good friend Bruno. We've been friends since third grade, and he was telling me about real estate, how he was looking to get into it. He was really excited. He had some fire in his eyes, he was just fired up about it. And I was like, well, I should take a look at what he's doing. I could do something with my friends, and I could learn a lot and grow a lot in the process. And it's way more exciting to me than going to college, because I didn't totally believe in the whole college process. Way more exciting to me than going to college and then just getting a 9-to-5 job. So that was the catalyst, just going back and having a conversation with him. And I think, as soon as my leave ended, I went back to base. It was like a light switch flicked in my brain, and I made a lot of really big changes in my personal life as well as my professional life, to just really make sure that I'm going to be set up to be able to do that, because real estate's tough. It's not the easiest business to be in, and preparing for it helps.
So it's awesome. On leave, you had somebody you met up with, and they just inspired you, and it kind of gave you a vision of a different path. Maybe you weren't really aware of that path before.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I hadn't even considered it.
I love that, because when we're meeting with different people and we're just trying to get as many different perspectives, sometimes that path suddenly becomes visible, or at least part of it. And we're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to go down this path. So Bruno was that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you went back off of leave, and you're like, okay, I've got a vision for where I want to go. And now that I've got that, I can create a map to get there. And you said you made some really tough decisions, or really big decisions in your life at that point in time.
Yeah.
What happened? What did you do?
So at the time, before I guess the proverbial light switch flicked in my head, I was, just playing. I was spending a lot of my time, or just wasting a lot of my time away. I was smoking about half a pack of cigarettes a day. Didn't really have any direction of where I was going. It was basically just ride out my contract until I got out of the Marines, and that kind of a thing. And so as soon as I had a direction of where I wanted to go, I started getting really serious about reading. I started reading every day. I haven't stopped that. I read almost every single day.
That's awesome.
Still since then, and always about either personal development stuff or real estate education, or just something that can teach me. So I'm always trying to learn. That's when I started learning, really. And I quit smoking cigarettes cold turkey. So, and what I did was I had a whiteboard. I bought a whiteboard, and I started tracking all my expenses, where I was spending my money, because I really wanted to save. So I figured if I could see where all my money's going, it would help me save. And it did. It helped me a lot. And I also, on that whiteboard, I had days without smoking. And, the first day I started with a big fat 0. And I don't know why, but that just worked for me. And so I just, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you're up to 10, past 10, you don't want to see that number go back down to 0. So
that's amazing. I think, I'm a big believer in anything that you want to improve, you have to track. You have to measure. It's kind of like, if we were watching a basketball game and there was no score, it would just be boring, right? You'd give up after a few minutes. You wouldn't watch it anymore.
Yeah.
So you've got to have some way of keeping score. So I like what you did with finances. I think that's huge. And a lot of people need to do that. Like, keep score. Where am I at? And then using that same thing for the smoking. Because, if you're keeping score and you're tallying that every day, you don't want to restart it. And so you're probably going to have, after a couple of weeks or whatever, you might have that temptation to go back and do that. But that if I do that, I've got to erase this and start over. Or even those moments when you're really stressed. I know a lot of people will kind of quit smoking, and then when they get, they're really stressed, they go and they start over. So sometimes that scorekeeping can kind of help, minimize that risk, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't want to erase it. I've been looking at this every day. So that's incredible. So the plan was, in that case, like, I want to completely just make a change. Like, I've got this vision now of where it is that I want to go. And there's a couple of things that are maybe preventing me, or that would prevent me from going there. And so step 1, let's get rid of those things that are going to stop me.
Yeah.
And then step 2, let's start taking some steps towards where it is that we want to go.
Yep, absolutely. And then I also started picking up some side hustles too. That was the last part I forgot. Was I just started with all my free time, I would spend gaining knowledge or trying to go out and get some more money so I could save up and buy my first house.
Awesome. So when you were keeping track of your money, you're trying to put away as much as you can. You're trying to keep your living expenses as low as possible.
Yes.
Okay. So then that usually requires a lot of sacrifice, right? Which a lot of people aren't used to, right? A lot of times people are like, hey, I've got to either keep up with the Joneses, or I've got to buy this, or they've got to buy all these things in order to feel important or to feel good.
Right.
Whereas what you did was like, that stuff doesn't matter. What does matter is I've got this vision, this path that I want to go down, and I needed to put away as much as I can to make that possible, right? And that very beginning part, like, if I don't put that away, this doesn't become possible, right?
That's right, yeah.
So during that time, when you were trying to put away as much as you can, what was life like? Like, what did you do with your time? Like, how did you make it so that your expenses were low enough so that you could just put more money away?
Well, it wasn't exciting.
Okay.
Because I was really focused on that goal of getting out of the rat race, being financially free, and doing all that. That was always front of mind for me. So, going out and having a good time and everything like that was always at the back of my mind. So I would eat at the chow hall. We had the worst chow hall on base. It was the infantry chow hall. So they just, wasn't good food, but it was already paid for, so I didn't have to pay for that. So I'd eat at the chow hall. I wouldn't really go out too much. And to be honest, when you're in the military, you're getting a very low pay, but if you're living in the barracks, you really don't have that many expenses. You have your car, and you have whatever else you want to go spend your money on. So it's pretty easy to save money if you really set your mind to it. I'd made a point of not going out and just blowing a ton of money while I was going out in town and just spending a bunch of money.
Was it hard if you had some friends that are like, hey, we're all hanging out, we're going to go out, and they were like, Jeremy, we want you to come?
Well, so I guess the good thing that worked in my favor at that point was that I had a longer contract than all of my friends who were in. So I had a 5-year contract. Most contracts are 4 years. And so all of my friends who were in my peer group, everyone got out before me. I had probably about 6 months on the end of my contract. It was pretty lonely, but I was like, I didn't really have that many friends because all my friends had already kind of moved on. Okay. And when you're in that last part of your contract, a lot of times they don't really include you in stuff, like in field ops and unit workouts, stuff like that, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, you're not as involved with other people. So I didn't really run into that issue too much.
Okay, so that kind of made it a little bit easier for your friends left, and so we didn't have that temptation of like, hey, let's go do this and have fun or whatever, and then you're like, no, I'm just going to rat hole money.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of worked in my favor because if not, I probably, I would have still had some fun with them. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then you get out, and you lived in Connecticut.
Yeah.
At that time. Okay, so you lived out. You get to Connecticut. You get back home. Where did you go from there? Because you had real estate on your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, but you weren't quite sure. Did you know where it was you were going to start, or was this like kind of a new path? I've got to try to figure this out now.
I was, at the time I was listening to Bigger Pockets every day. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So yeah. Great real estate podcast. I was listening to that was another piece of my education. I was listening to one full episode a day and exposing myself to all these different paths in real estate. So my head was spinning. I was like, where do I go? There's so many, which is cool to me because there's a lot of different directions you can go. But it just I kind of fell into it, I guess you could say, because about 3 months before I got out of the military, my same buddy Bruno, he gave me a call one day and he said, hey, I found this fourplex, and I'm really trying to figure out how to buy it. I can't really get the financing. Just throwing this out there. Would you want to co-sign on this thing with me? And I was just thinking, oh, it's like you co-sign on a car. It's not. But I said, yeah. And because I looked at the numbers as like, this is a pretty solid deal. So that was it. We got our first fourplex actually. We signed the offer, signed all the paperwork before I even got back to Connecticut. So I guess I bought it sight unseen. And then I got back to Connecticut once I got out. We closed on it a couple months afterwards. We had a very, very long closing process. It took like 3 months. Wow. It was a tough one to push through. But we did it. And that was the first thing I did. And at the same time, I think about a month after I got back home, I started wholesaling because there was another one of my friends who was trying to get into that side of things. And he's like, do you want to do this with me? I was like, yeah, I want to do real estate. Let's just do it. So you bought the fourplex, and then you lived in one, Bruno lived in the other, and then you rented the other two out. Is that how it worked? So actually, when we first bought it, all the units were occupied. There's tenants in there, and then at the very same time as we bought it, COVID hit. So no evictions, no, you couldn't get tenants out or anything like that. We had some not great tenants when we bought the place, but that was okay. We knew that going in. So neither of us moved in until I think about 6 or 7 months after I moved into one of the units in the bottom, and then he actually ended up moving in with me into that same unit, and we rented out the other three.
Okay, so during that time, during COVID, did you have trouble collecting rent from the other 4 tenants that were there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. And we had to, well, actually one of them just left. They didn't say anything, and we hadn't been getting rent from them anyways. But, one day we were just walking around the house and we were like, I don't think anyone's living in there. And so we went down there. They left the place a big mess, and, but it was good because they left and we were able to go and turn those units over. We renovated all of them, got them up to the market rents, which is almost double what they had been before.
Yeah.
So with that deal was really good because we were able to build in some cash flow, and we did pretty well with it, I think.
See, I think that's a good lesson there that you just gave, because you had a property where you just acquired this property. You have people that aren't paying it. But that particular part you kind of skipped over and you said, well, it's a good thing because now we can get people in there that are paying more.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good lesson, because sometimes when you either you buy a business or you buy a property or whatever, sometimes things don't always go as planned and there can be something that hits, right? And if we sit in that, it can be rough, right? We can question whether or not we're doing the right thing or whatever, but it's like, hey, it's just a thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a thing, it happened, but what's the solution to it? So I love that. It sounds like let's figure out what the solution is. We can turn something that might seem negative, but turn it into a positive and say, well, this is going to be better because we can get them out and actually get somebody in that's going to pay more, and then that's going to cash flow. So we might have short-term pain, but then long-term we're going to be in a much better spot.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
That's I would say that's pretty synonymous with real estate in general. There's always a little bit of short-term pain, I think, in this business, but long-term it's one of the most proven concepts as far as businesses go. Real estate goes back thousands and thousands of years. So
can't avoid pain.
Can't avoid pain.
You got to just go for it.
You just have to go through it and accept that as part of the process. I kind of look forward to it sometimes because I know that's growth. That going through that pain, it means that you are growing and you're getting somewhere. So
that's awesome. You mentioned before that a big part of what drives you is some of the self-development that you've learned, and I can tell that in just kind of how you talk, that's such an important part.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that started while you were in the Marines, or was that something that started earlier, when you were younger?
No, that started at the same time as I quit smoking. At the same, that was all. When I say like it really was like a light switch, it was almost like I turned into a different person. So I didn't do any personal development or anything like that beforehand. And I kind of jumped into it. I'm really glad I have, because that always keeps me grounded. I like to, I read a lot of books about mindset, about just, how to interact with other people, stuff like that. That's very helpful, especially when you're in those tougher spots. Mm-hmm. You can always look back and say, okay, there's ways to get around this, and there's other people who have been in way worse spots than I have. It could be way worse. There's a lot of different ways to keep moving forward through some of that pain that you're inevitably going to be hitting.
I think that self-development can be so important, because like when you have that moment where you just came back and you just acquired this new property and it's something new, right? It's a new venture. And then you have tenants that aren't paying, it can be a really stressful situation, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you can go to a place where you think like, this is just how it's going to be. And then you're like, I am never buying another fourplex or anything like that ever again, right? Or you can say like, oh, okay, based on what you've learned, these things that come up can be more temporary. And I just got to figure out a way out of it. If I shut down, then I might not be able to think of a way to get out of it. And I might just be stuck here. But if I can think, right, if I can focus and just try to figure out, okay, what's the solution, then I can get out of it, and it's temporary instead.
Absolutely.
Sorry, did you have something?
So I was just going to say, so one of the things that I've found challenging, and I think a lot of people probably do, is when you're trying to create new habits, do you feel like the military kind of helped like transition into like being able to be productive in new habits? Or was there something you did that you felt was like beneficial to starting all of these new habits that led you down that road to success?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I wouldn't have had the discipline to be able to keep some of those new habits without going through some of that forced discipline that you get, especially in the Marine Corps. So there's a lot of things. There's a big stigmatism, especially in the veteran community, and especially in the infantry community. When you're in the infantry, there's technically no transferable skills to the outside world other than to be a police officer.
Yeah.
It's not true. I mean, you have mental skill. Like you have an extremely strong mental capacity to handle BS. To just push through stuff.
That's awesome.
So I think that was probably one of the most helpful prerequisites for me, was already being able to deal with hard stuff, because that's one of the biggest things in entrepreneurship, and I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't end up making it too far, is because they can't handle the pain sometimes. So I think that really helped a lot.
Is there something that you can think of that like you learned specifically in the military that helped you develop habits? Like, was it just having to do the same thing over and over again and just ingrained in you, like once I start this I keep going with it? Or
yeah, well, it was like when we were in the military, I wasn't on the clock. You work until the job's done. You don't work until you're clocked out, right? And that's very, very synonymous with entrepreneurship. You work until the job's done, and then you find another job, and then you work till that job's done, and you just keep doing that. I think that was one of the biggest things for me, and I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff too. But
it's probably that repetition, right? You get it creates a habit, and so you're like, if I'm starting something, I'm finishing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just that itself, like if people have that one quality, like you can go pretty far with just finishing what it is, what you start.
Yeah, there's so many like little intangible things that like you can't go to school for, like you can't learn it in a classroom or something like that, that are very, very helpful when it comes to pushing through adversity in general, and also entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. So during that time, you had a different business that you worked on, right? So you came out, you started doing the real estate, you bought the fourplex.
The side hustles.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a side hustle, but you had another business that you had started, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that one, because that had to do more with some remodeling and stuff like that, right? So
yeah.
Is it that you thought, okay, the real estate is how I'm going to create wealth, and this business is how I'm going to create income for now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And actually, the first business that I had on my own, because my other, my fourplex I had with my friend, the wholesaling business I had with my two partners there. So my first business that was my own was Bourgeois Landscaping, and I didn't like it.
Okay.
It was just I didn't really know quite what I was doing, but it was a really good introduction for me into doing things on my own. So it was a good learning experience. I had just a push mower and a truck, and I would just go mow people's lawns. Pretty brutal, So I did that, and I plowed in the winter. Got a whole plow set up and everything.
What prompted you to start that business?
At the time, I think my friends were doing the remodeling thing, and I was like, okay, I want to do something a little bit different than what they're doing. I want it to be something that's like my own.
Okay.
And so that was pretty much it. But I wanted it to be in some relation to real estate, so that as a byproduct, maybe I could get some more deals from it, or do something, or just learn more about real estate in general. So I started with that. That didn't last very long.
When you went into that, was it like, I know that this is going to be temporary, or was it more at that point in time you thought, well, this is something that could be good for me, so I'm going to go down this path and experiment. I'm going to try it.
That was more so. I felt like it was something I wanted to try and see if I'd like. And if I did, then I'd stick with it.
Okay.
Build a business out of it. If not, which is the case, then I would just move on to the next thing.
I love that, because sometimes people are just afraid to try. And it's okay to try. And if you decide like, okay, I don't like this, it's okay to move on and find something else that you do like.
Yeah.
So when you started that business, you had a mower, and that was pretty much your only equipment.
Yeah, mower and a weed whacker.
Okay. Well, that's awesome, because it shows that you can start a business like that with relatively little capital.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a lot, right? We had somebody
Correct.
else who had purchased one that was already existing and required more capital, but you can go out and at least get started like that and get your feet wet, learn.
Yeah.
How did you acquire your first customers for that business?
I just asked around. So I had, because I had the couple friends that I did who were in real estate, I asked them for referrals. I got some, I got most of my business actually just from their referrals. So it was mostly other real estate investors that I was working for. When I was plowing, I think I was putting out like Facebook posts into local groups and stuff like that. Really just bootstrapping it. Once I started doing more remodeling work, I did some door to door. But I never spent money in marketing for either of those things, which is, I think, another good point, is that you can bootstrap it without putting in a ton of capital. And that's how you get your feet wet. And it might not be the most profitable thing in the world, but you'll learn. And having the knowledge is more important than making the money in the beginning.
With that business, that was kind of your first, like, I'm going to jump in the business and try something.
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn from that business that help your current business?
Yeah. Well, it's tougher than I thought it would be.
Okay.
Systems are very important to have. I didn't really have anything systemized when I first started. I just had it in my head, I have to go mow these lawns. And then I think I missed a couple of them, and then I was like, okay, I have to start building systems so that I don't just trust my brain to remember everything, because it's not going to. So I think that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned from that. And then also learning, because I did have the capital that I could have invested in better equipment. I could have invested in people. But at the same time, I don't think I really would have known how to manage it that well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it was good for me that I didn't invest a lot of capital, even though I could have. It was good that I didn't, because it wasn't really something that I wanted to do long term anyways.
Is that something you figured out pretty quickly when you started doing it, or did it take a little while?
Yeah, I think I want to say it took me maybe about after the first year. I just kind of figured, I was like, okay, this isn't really that profitable. Mowing lawns with a push mower, my hourly was like, I could make the same thing as someone at McDonald's makes. So I was just, it took me a little while. I enjoyed the plowing. The plowing was fun. But it's very, very sporadic and inconsistent. You don't really know when it's going to snow. So, it was good, but it was a little bit too sporadic for me. You're relying on Mother Nature to provide you with work, pretty much.
Got it. So then at the end of that, you're like, okay, I don't really want to continue down this path. There's just not enough in it for me to make sense. And so I'm gonna pivot, and I'm gonna start something else.
Yeah.
Is that when you went into doing some of the remodeling?
Yeah.
Stuff?
So
Okay.
I bought after about a year of being in real estate. So I had a couple wholesale deals under my belt. I had that first fourplex that I bought under my belt, and my first flip. That was all with partners, and I decided that I want to start doing some of this on my own. So I bought a duplex to flip, and I didn't have enough money to pay for the assignment fee, because it was a wholesale deal. So I had to sell. I had a car and a truck at the time. I had to sell my car. I sold it for the exact amount that paid for the assignment fee, because I don't like owing people money. It doesn't.
Can you explain an assignment fee really quick, just
Yeah.
for those that aren't sure?
Yes. So an assignment fee is when you're talking about wholesaling real estate. A wholesale contract is when I go to a homeowner and I say, I will, we'll make you an offer for this amount. Say it's $100,000, and that contract is assignable. So I can take that contract and go to someone who's going to be an end buyer, and I can say, I'll I'll give you this contract for a $10,000 fee. So they're purchasing it for $110,000. And that fee, that's the assignment fee.
Awesome.
So I had to pay, I had to sell my car to pay for that assignment fee. And so I had no money at the time. I had spent it all on the down payment. I opened up some credit cards at, the first year. Here's a good little nugget for anyone who's getting started. If you're doing a flip, make sure the numbers work first. But, if the numbers are good and you're just bootstrapping it for capital, you can get credit cards for the first year with 0% interest. I'm not a big advocate for credit cards. I don't use them a ton, but for that, it's good because you can get a good influx of capital. I had about 30 grand on those credit cards. And so that was a little bit of a risky spot.
I like that though. So you've got this. You're out of capital.
Yeah.
You find a deal from a wholesaler.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, I'm going to take some risk here. You've reviewed the numbers. You feel good about them.
Yes.
And you're willing to risk your car in order to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, at the time, I thought I had enough until I got to the closing table. And then I was like, oh man, I thought this assignment fee was I thought that the assignment fee was part of the purchase price I was paying. They're like, no, it's not. So I'm like, oh man, I don't even have the money for that. So I guess I got to go sell my car. So that's what I did, but.
Oh, that's how you figured that out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't even know at the time. I just had to make it work. I think they would have been okay with me just paying them maybe after the flip sold or something like that. But
see, I think the thing is, like, there's a good lesson in that. Like, it's okay to stumble. I think a lot of times people are so worried about those things, but most of the people who, I think everybody that I know at least that's successful, like you stumble a lot.
Oh yeah.
The only thing is you just keep going, right? You fall off and you just keep going, and then you learn every time you fall off, and so you stumble, and now you know. A lot of times people won't take that risk because there's so many unknowns, and you're like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. The good news is you only have to learn something once. I've learned a couple things twice or three times, but
Depends on how much it stings.
Yeah, exactly. So, but for something like that, for example, that was something that I made sure, the money that I was bringing to closing, made sure I had it, and that I wasn't overextending myself. So yeah, absolutely. So you're right about that one.
Yeah, I love that. So then we do the remodeling business. We've started that. Was it kind of the same thing? Like, hey, the flips, the stuff like that, that's the side hustle. The remodeling is going to be the main hustle. Is that kind of what you were doing?
Yeah.
Or what the plan was?
Yeah. So for that flip that I was doing, I didn't have the money to hire a contractor to come in. Luckily, I had been doing some work with my friends, just learning how to paint and do floors and do all these different things. But I didn't have the money to hire a contractor to come in and do the work on this house. So I'm like, okay, well, I have the money to get tools. So I found some used tools off Facebook Marketplace, I think. I bought a couple new ones at Home Depot. And I just did all the work myself. And I had all these tools now. So I was at a weird point where I got to the point where my project was finished. Also at this time, because I was out of money, I picked up a side job just working at a local restaurant serving tables. So
was that how you covered living expenses while you were working on the flip?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I would go serve tables for most of the night. Before that, I would be at my flip. I'd show up to the job site show up to the restaurant, and in the parking lot I'd change into my other work clothes. And then oftentimes after work, I would get off and, go back to the house and do some more work. So it was really long. That was a pretty tough time in my life, and I was just really working a lot. Mm-hmm. But it was all good. And because I had built up those skills, I basically flipped this whole duplex myself. I did the drywall. I was hanging the drywall by myself, one hand holding it up, the other hand screwing it in. And because I had learned to do all that, I was like, okay, I think I have the skill sets to be able to do some remodeling work. So I got my contractor's license, which in Connecticut is stupid easy. It's ridiculously easy. It shouldn't be that easy. But I got my contractor's license, and I had all the tools. So I hired, I started going door to door, create a logo and everything. And I was like, I need to make some money off of this. I need to make money because right now I got nothing. So that's how that started. Shortly after I sold my flips, I had money back in my account, which is definitely a good thing. But yeah,
Now, that's awesome. It sounds like you have these things come up where like you're in a bit of a pinch, so to speak, and you use that as a way to force you into something into a path, and just like, okay, I've got to make a decision here. I can't stay stuck in this.
yeah,
I got to make a decision. I've got all these tools here. What's the best way to monetize what I have? Great, let's use these tools, and I've got my labor,
yeah,
and then I can go and I can make this happen while I'm still trying to figure out like some of the real estate wholesaling and all of that.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because if you're in that kind of a situation and you don't do anything, it's going to go downhill really fast. You're going to have people start calling you, asking where their money is because you're not paying the bills. So it's either that, or you just go all in and do whatever you have to do to make sure you get things done so that you can move forward. And I think that's oftentimes like, well, if you're going into entrepreneurship, I think at some point or another you're going to run into something similar, where
For sure.
you're just going to have to put your head down and do the work. And I actually really, I can't say I was having fun during that time, but I felt really fulfilled because I was waking up in the morning and, I just knew I had a million things to get done that day, and that it was going to be a really productive day, and that the day before had been productive and the week before had been productive. So, it was all good. I just viewed it as part of the learning and growing process.
That's awesome. And then so you went from having the remodeling business, and then you decided to go into the real estate wholesaling, maybe full time.
Yeah. So I had done some wholesaling before, just with my friends. But around that time that I closed up shop with my remodeling business, I did that because I was leaving Connecticut. I'd moved out to Utah at that point. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to take all these tools with me. I sold my tools off. I finished my last couple jobs, and I moved out to Utah. And I was like, okay, we're going to go back into real estate, and I want to, instead of now that I understand remodeling, and the reason I did remodeling was because when I started wholesaling, I didn't understand how to run numbers on repairs. So I was trying to send out deals, and I had no idea what I was doing really. So I really wanted to learn more about the remodeling side of things, how to estimate things so that when I go in and look at a house, I can decide to flip it. I can flip it, or I can wholesale it, or hold it as a rental. But once I left Connecticut, I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. I only wanted to work on my own houses. I was sick of working for other homeowners, to be honest. So I got out here and I figured I will start flipping again. I will work on my own houses, but I want to start by marketing, because if you're going directly to the sellers, you can typically get a better deal than if you're finding a deal on the MLS or buying a wholesale deal, because you're
Gotcha.
always paying for someone else's profit that way. It's a lot easier to negotiate a good price on a deal if you're just going directly to the seller.
Gotcha. So you moved out here, and that was a few years ago, I think, right? Like
Yeah.
it was relatively
Yeah.
recent. So you moved out here, you sold that business or closed up that business, moved out here, and then you're like, this is gonna be my main thing. I'm gonna go through this.
Yep.
And so you've done really well lately, but I know in the beginning it's always a little bit more challenging, especially when you come into a new area.
Yeah.
Was it hard to survive while you were trying to figure out how to make everything work in this particular area? Being new, you don't have the contacts, right? You don't know anybody out here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'll just tell you straight up, my first 4 months, I didn't get paid at all. I didn't get a single paycheck. And the good thing for me is that I think I don't go and blow money on stuff. If I have something come in, my view on it is that I will pay the bare minimum on just my living expenses and try to reinvest the rest. So at that point, I had done about a year of remodeling work, and I had saved up, I think, about $100,000. So I was, financially, I was okay. I was okay to go do this, and I could have been marketing for a year, or a year without having any deals come in, and I would have been okay. But it did take me a good 4 months to get my first deal locked down, and that was even with going and hitting the ground running, and starting to market it pretty much as soon as I got out to Utah.
Yeah, that's good that you built up that reserve account over that time, and a lot of that was just with your ability to kind of hang on to the money and not just go out and blow it, go out and spend it on things.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I didn't leave myself time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't leave myself time.
You're working 100 hours a week. You don't have any time to spend the money anyways.
That's right. Yeah, right? That's right.
And so you're putting money away, and I like that because it gives you when you've spent some time accumulating that and you're really cautious with what you spend, it gives you freedom. You have the freedom to choose what it is that you want to do. So you didn't have to come here and just like, hey, I need a job day one. You're like, no, I've got this path that I want to go down, and I'm going to do it. It's a new area, but I've got some time.
Yep.
I'm not in dire need right now of capital. I can live okay. Yeah. And I just got to start now. I've got to start exploring. I've got to start meeting people. I've got to start, doing whatever I can to start making this path successful.
Do you miss your tools?
Do I miss my tools? I still have some of them. I don't have all of them. I got rid of all the big ones. And yes, I do, I had some good ones in there that I could have used on my house that we bought out here. So yes, I do miss some of my tools. I like working with my hands. I really do. It's enjoyable to me. So
over the last couple of years, like your trajectory of, where you start with wholesaling to where it is now, it's just like it's on this really steep incline, which is incredible. And I made a video the other day and I was talking about celebrating because you had just the biggest win of your life was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, we were talking about it, and I was so excited for you because you had this, big project that you were able to move. And so you had a seller that was in a situation and they needed to get out of it, and you were able to move it for them, and you were able to make an assignment fee.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you about when that was getting a hit, and it almost didn't seem real to you until it was there, right? So this was the single largest deposit that you've had since in your wholesaling career, and then at that time, the most money you've had in your bank account in your life, and this was more recently, right?
Yeah.
If you go back a few years ago and you're going down this path, did it seem possible that would be something that you would hit so soon?
No. I honestly, and just to clarify that one, so that was $100,000 assignment fee, and I had seen, different videos that people would like post about, just closing like these crazy deals, and I'm like, how do people do that? Like, I can't see myself. I think one day I'll be able to do that. I didn't think it was going to happen this year. I'll tell you that much. But the good thing is that when you're talking about wholesaling, you make your own luck by going out and talking to sellers. And the more you talk to sellers, you'll just have a big opportunity come up. Eventually it will happen. If you just go out there, put your best foot forward every day, you'll find a really good deal. And it was a good deal for the seller too. That was off of a 20-unit apartment complex. So, and then the purchase price was about $3 million. They had an appraisal for much higher, and they understood that they were going to take less than the appraisal, and they just wanted to basically get rid of it and move on, and that was okay with them. And so they were able to do that without listing it on the market, all this different stuff without having to deal with that whole hassle. They got a lower purchase price, but they also didn't have to pay any realtor fees, which would have been higher than the assignment fee. And
sometimes that price range, it can take a while to sell as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That could, if they would have priced it at the appraised value, it wouldn't have sold. It wouldn't have. So,
they might have needed to get out of it. I mean, you don't know why they need to sell it, right? There could be some reason, but
exactly,
whatever reason, there's a problem there, and they need a solution to it, and something that's fast.
Yeah, and the buyer got a good deal. So it really was a win-win situation for everyone who was involved in that deal, which is awesome.
What did it feel like when that deposit hit your account and you pulled it out and you saw it?
Well, to be honest, at that point we had gone through
I saw it second.
Huh?
She did see it second. Yeah. So to be honest, at that time, we're 2 to 3 extensions into this deal. I was like, I really hope this is going to close. So at that point, for me, it was like, oh, finally. But when we first had the contract assigned and we had it on paper, that was really, I think, like the whole like first couple days, I was like jumping up and down and left and right, and yeah, I was super super excited for because that was when we knew that was going to happen. So
that is awesome. Yeah, and I remember it was just so exciting to see that.
Yeah.
That was a good month.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, if you were to give advice to somebody that's a few years ago, right, where you were in that state where you just had no money, right, and you were trying to figure out that path, knowing what you know now, what would you tell them?
Well, I would just say that everyone goes through. If you're going to be doing anything great with your life, if you have any big plans, you're going to have to. It's just part of the course that you're going to deal with a lot of adversity. The bigger the vision, the more adversity you're going to confront, and the more adversity you confront, the more you're going to grow through that process. So I wouldn't look at adversity and difficulty in a sense of like, oh, this sucks. No, that's synonymous with having a good life, is going through those tough times. You can't have one without the other. So
you got to go through the suck. That's the only way.
You have to. You do. Yeah. Yep.
And so now I know you're looking for, you're constantly trying to expand what it is, the deals that you're working on. Right. This is what I see. So you started with, wholesaling some smaller deals, and then you're like, okay, let's go find some bigger deals. And then it's like, okay, let's go find and start to learn some of the land stuff. And it was interesting to me that you're so willing to spend for your education. Because I know a lot of times people are nervous about that, right? Maybe they'll pay for college if there's a scholarship or they got a grant or whatever, but you're so willing to spend to learn those things wherever it is that you want to go, whatever direction it is that you want to go. You're like, I'll write a big check. I'm just going to do it because I know that at some point in time that's going to happen. Yeah. You've probably spent a lot on those throughout the years. Have they been worth it for you?
Absolutely. And I think psychologically, if you're spending thousands of dollars on a course or a program or some sort of educational piece, it psychologically commits you to doing it because you are invested now. You've taken some of your hard-earned money and you're putting it into growing yourself. And I think the most important thing you can invest in before real estate, before anything else, before crypto or whatever you want to invest in, is you have to invest in yourself. So I always look at that and I get excited. If I can learn something new, I can add a tool to my tool belt, so to speak. In real estate, if I can do wholesales and fix and flips and land development and real estate agent stuff and all these different things, it just equips me so much better to be able to deal with as many different situations as I can and be able to monetize those too. So I think it's super important to just keep growing and learning, because especially in something like real estate, you can learn a lot. Like there's no real, I don't see any plateau in growth and learning here. So
I think the important thing for people to know is, to get that $100,000 assignment fee, it's a set of skills that are stacked on top of each other that you've learned over the course of time. So with each thing that you did, right, when you first started in your landscaping business, right, you're networking, you're asking buddies like, hey, do you have some lawns that I can do? When you had the other business that was with the remodeling, right? You're knocking doors, you're doing whatever, you're just trying to drum up business that way. Yeah. And so you get comfortable, or you get familiar with talking to people and trying to figure out a solution, and you stack that with with your buddies when they were looking for wholesale deals and they were, trying to teach you how to do the real estate. It's like it takes all of those skills over time that you learn to where then later on you get to do some really big deals. And so it's okay if you do some smaller things, but or even if something, it doesn't work, like you start that business and it doesn't work, you're still stacking some skills that you're going to be able to use for later on because you'll never lose those.
Yeah.
Okay, you were going to say something.
No.
Oh, okay. It looked like she was like, okay, stop.
Yeah, but you're right though. I mean, it takes, you wouldn't see those big ones, or if you see them in the beginning, it's probably a little bit of luck, but you don't see those big wins without putting in the hard work first. You have to do that first, the grind, right?
Yes, there's no way around it.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's right.
You cannot avoid the grind.
You can't.
You cannot avoid the suck. You cannot avoid the pain. Like
No.
It's all there. If you're trying to avoid it, you're never gonna see the $100,000 assignment fees.
That's right.
You're never gonna get those big numbers. You're never gonna have that 6 figures in the bank account.
Well, and I think
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think
Correct.
it's the mindset behind the grind. It's like, how do you see the grind? Do you see it as like this obstacle
Yeah.
that's just so huge you can't get through, or do you see it as a challenge or like a hurdle that you can jump to get to the next phase, right? Like it's a growing experience. And I learned early on, it was funny when I started my business, I was like, I kept having hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, and initially I was like, it would just pound me down, and I'm like, I can't do this, like it's so hard. And then you get through it, and it it builds resilience. And so for me, I got to a point where I was like, like every time I have these challenges, like it seems like the end of the world, and then I get through it and it wasn't that bad, right? And it's like, okay, I got through it. So the next time I would start to get into that mindset of like, oh, it's just a experience, right? It's an adventure. And so it started getting easier to like overcome those obstacles, because you realize like they're not as bad as you think, and chances are you'll get through it, one way or the other. And you just grow from it. So
Absolutely. And you can keep stacking those wins too. So you can reach back. I've listened to some David Goggins stuff before, and he always talks about reaching back into his mental cookie jar. Whenever things get really tough, you can look back and say, okay, I overcame this really big thing. Like I can do that. I can take care. I can handle this next challenge.
Well, it builds confidence.
Yep. Exactly. So you can change your mindset about that. It's tough in the beginning, but you change your mindset by actually doing it, right?
Right.
Courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah, that's
And
a
big
great
muscles.
quote. Did you make that up? That's a great quote.
I've said it several times.
Okay.
I don't know if I probably got it from somewhere. I don't know, but it just made the most sense to me, because it was like the more that you faced those things and you got through it, it's like the brain just knows, okay, we can face hard things now. We can tackle hard things.
Yeah.
And I think if you avoid hard things, then that muscle just gets weak, and then all you do is you do everything possible to be comfortable and avoid anything worthwhile.
Well,
and it's all gonna take that pain, and you've got to have the courage to just go through it, despite the risks, despite the pain, everything.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, like you can't be courageous without challenge.
Yeah.
So if you want to be courageous, then you gotta have more challenges.
Exactly.
So you can't have one without the other. So.
That's right.
Have more challenges.
Yes. Be more courageous.
Hey, you can create challenges. I created one a couple years ago. I challenged my stepbrother to a race, except it was a marathon, because I knew I wanted to do it with someone, but I wanted to really challenge myself, and he was up for it. So like we did it, and we both, because we did that, I can always like reach back and I'm like, yeah, we did that. We did that marathon, and that's another one of those things. You can just keep adding these different things. If you feel like you're stagnating, add a challenge. That's what I like about that 75 hard challenge, like stuff like that. There's a lot of different things that you can go do, and it will just increase your mental capacity to be able to handle big stuff, you know.
Confidence comes from overcoming multiple challenges.
Yeah.
So the more that we do it, and the next time there's a challenge there, we know that we've done it many times, and we have the confidence to take on that one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Jeremy, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was really fun.
Yes.
I think you've got so many nuggets there, and I'm excited to see what the future brings for you. So I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. This has been super fun.